Hello again, parents. I'm so excited to be with you on another day on this quest. So today is a day to learn another transformative conscious parenting skill. And this one is really fundamental and so powerful. Of course, it'll take a lot of practice, but once it comes easy to you, it has the capacity to shift all your relationships. It is the skill of moving away from blind reactivity toward empathically feeling our feelings. You know, most of us are living our lives in a state of slumber, in unconscious reactivity, rather than a state of conscious responsiveness. Most of us are just ruled by the external world. You know, we're just stimulated by the external situations in our lives, and we feel we are tethered to them. We constantly and forever react to them without any degree of conscious awareness. Most of our lives are so pressure-filled, so stress-filled. I mean, look at our day-to-day existence. We have alarm clocks that wake us up instead of waking up with the natural rhythms of our bodies. We're sitting indoors at a desk job all day instead of moving our bodies in the natural sunlight, craving for the weekend. We are harried and stressed and always on this short fuse. So it's quite natural that our children bear the brunt of our frustrations. Of course, we're going to yell at them. We're going to command and order them around. Of course, we are exhausted ourselves. So it's quite natural that our capacity to respond consciously falls short. I mean, let's face it, most of us are reactors, not interactors. We're constantly in a state of reactivity, not interactivity. So the reason this really happens, this slumberous state where we're constantly responding to the environment through this blindness, this occurs because we have forgotten how to feel our feelings. You know, few of us ever were raised with parents that allowed us to truly feel our feelings. In fact, most of us don't even know how to feel them. All we know how to do is react to them. You know, most of us have been told that when we have a feeling, don't feel it. It's too uncomfortable. Simply react to it. And most of us emote. So in order to stop this incessant cycle of blind reactivity, we need to begin to feel our feelings. And because we've been raised to deny our feelings and be uncomfortable, in fact, when we have a big feeling, what we quite naturally do is we just take those feelings and dump them like a hot potato onto someone else. And when our children are in our lives and they are so absorbent, then when they receive these hot potatoes every day, all day long from us, then it begins to indelibly shape their psyches. And in fact, it teaches them that this is what they need to do with their feelings. You see, feelings are not meant to be reacted to. They're not meant to be shown to the whole world or emoted upon. They are meant to be done only one thing with: feel them. It's really quite simple and eloquent, but yet this seems to be the hardest thing for humanity to do. In fact, I believe if we truly learn to feel our feelings, we wouldn't displace them on others, and then that would quite possibly be the end of our violent world. So what does it mean to truly feel our feelings? How can we truly experience them without getting deluged by them, without getting overwhelmed by them? Well, the way to do it is, sometimes you can imagine yourself being on a train station and watch your train of feelings go by without hopping on to the train. You can do that with your feelings or your thoughts. Or you can really experience the feelings rise within you like a wave would in front of you. And just as the wave rises and inevitably falls, in the same way we can watch our feelings rise, enter its peak of acute emotion, and then watch it recede. But you see, because we're so uncomfortable with watching it rise to the crest, it's that part of the feeling state that we short circuit by dumping that uncomfortable state of being onto others. But this is what I want to challenge you with. Allow that crest of the wave to rise within you. Allow yourself to go to the precipice of that uncomfortable state. Allow yourself to feel the sadness, feel the anger, feel the fear. You see, feeling it is very different than expressing it. Imagine feeling the anger, but never having the need to express it on anyone. That's how we end the reactivity cycle, and we shift the energy from the outer stimuli to the inner awakening. You know, the eternal reason why feelings are uncomfortable really is because we are forced to contend with ourselves. You know, if you really analyze how uncomfortable we are to be with ourselves, it would be quite a shocking fact. You know, when you ask someone to sit by themselves and just sit in their feelings, they simply are at odds. It's like they don't know what to do. It's like they're going to sit with a strange animal or a wild beast. They're afraid of that existence. Isn't that a tragedy? And this is what I'm trying to encourage you to learn in this quest. How to befriend yourself, how to see all parts of yourself as integral to who it is you are. Not to discard pieces of yourself, not to shame yourself, not to degrade yourself, but to welcome and embrace all pieces of yourself as valid. And when you integrate pieces of yourself, all those parts of yourself that you don't want to see, then you begin to become whole from within. This is the power of feeling your feelings. You see, every time you react and you emote and you displace those feelings onto others or onto a bottle of alcohol or onto Botox or onto any distraction, what you're telling yourself really is that that piece of yourself is invalid and you don't honor that piece of yourself. But instead, when you feel that peace, when you allow that peace into your consciousness, the message you're giving your inner being is that you love yourself, that you hold yourself sacred, that you consider yourself worthy. And when you give yourself that accolade, that permission, that worth, then guess what? The desire and need for it from someone on the outside dissipates. And that is the rise of true autonomy. So the key step, of course, in feeling our feelings is to become aware that we're feeling our feelings. What if we're not even aware? What if we're so split off from the present moment that the feeling of anger only shows up in an angry yelling at our children or an angry outburst? So the requirement again is deep inner connectivity. You know, many of us just begin yelling at our children and then later on realize, oh my goodness, I was feeling fatigued, or I was feeling tired, or I was feeling unworthy. You see, it's this disconnect between our inner awareness and our outer behavior that needs to be dissipated. This disconnection needs to evaporate. And the way to evaporate this is through inner awareness. So when the feeling arises, you know, fatigue or unworthiness or hunger, or just plain exhaustion or worry, when it rises, we need to watch it rise. We need to be aware in the moment that it's coming up in our body. We need to pay attention to the signs. You know, maybe our chest constricts or our jaw clenches or we begin sweating or our heart palpitates. We need to be attuned to our body's reactivity. And we need to signal to ourselves, I'm having a feeling. Then the next step, before we react, before we emote, is to go underneath the feeling, to begin to ask, why am I feeling this way? What is causing this stress? And again, this inquiry, this intelligent, wise discernment of asking why allows us to make the pivotal shift from wanting to pounce outward to going deeper inward. So when we go inward, we begin to honor the needs of our own inner child. We begin to pay attention to our own inner longings, our own inner strivings. We begin to articulate, you know, I'm feeling really tired right now, and that's why I'm getting angry with my child. I'm feeling really stressed out at my work right now, and that's why I'm getting impatient with my child. You see, when we shift our focus from the child as the provocateur into our own inner terrain, our own inner stimulation as the instigator, then the entire energy shifts. Now, we don't blame the child. And I'm not asking you to blame yourself either. I'm asking you to have awareness. With awareness comes compassion. Now you can begin to dialogue with your inner child. Maybe you ask your inner child, what can I do to help you? How can I make you feel whole? How can I nurture you? You know, these are the elements of self-care and self-compassion that truly allow us to become whole from within. As we integrate our own split-off emotions and feelings and begin to celebrate and honor them within our own being, we become whole. This wholeness allows for this great ease and acceptance within the self. And the minute we are at ease and acceptance with our own discarded pieces of self, then we offer an invitation to our children to honor their own discarded pieces. We allow them to experience their rage, their jealousies, their loneliness, their hurts. We don't seek to erase them anymore. In fact, we see this integration, this allowance, this expression as healthy, as valid, as something to be celebrated. We don't judge it. We don't curtail it. We don't manage it anymore. We honor that when our feelings are felt, they dissipate naturally and they leave our awareness and allow us to feel more integrated and more whole from within. So for today's task, we're going to practice. We're going to practice feeling big feelings. You know, you may wonder, why is it important to practice the big feeling? Well, because when you're in the big feeling, it's virtually impossible to have any introspection, to have any awareness. So in order to cultivate the muscle of awareness and presence, we need to do it outside the moment of reactivity. We need to cultivate and build the muscles of awareness in our moments of calm. So let's go to a moment in time when you last had an experience of a really big emotion with your child. Can you remember it? Can you remember those big feelings, how they overtook you like a storm? Do you remember all those rageful emotions within your body, all those tremulous feelings perhaps? Perhaps there was fear. Go back there. I want you to really feel those feelings. And now this time, I want you to, instead of reacting to your child or reacting to those feelings, imagine what it would feel like to allow those feelings to rise like a wave and recede like a wave. And instead of you getting deluged by the waves or getting drowned within the waves, I want you to imagine that you're standing at the shore. You're watching these feelings rise and fall. You're watching all your intense emotions become turbulent. Maybe they even rise up into a crescendo. Watch it. And then watch your feelings fade away. And again, and again. It is through the practice of imagining your feelings rising and falling like waves do, and waves always recede, that you begin to develop the awareness of how to do this in the moment of heat, in the moment of conflict. You see, if you don't practice the skill, how will you know what to do when you're overtaken by the waves of your feelings? If you don't practice the skill, then quite naturally, when those waves come into your awareness, you're going to get tossed and turned and get thrown into the ocean. You know, a huge part of conscious parenting is the practice. You know, you have to practice driving before you take a test. You have to practice math before you take that exam. You have to practice virtually everything. You know, a surgeon before his first surgery or her first surgery has to go through an inordinate amount of hours of practice. Well, this is like doing surgery in your own psyche. You're going deep within and you're excavating all the emotional baggage, the vestiges of the past that are cluttering your inner space, and you're one by one precisely taking them out. This takes practice. So if we don't devote the time to sit with ourselves, to know ourselves, to acquaint ourselves, how will we gain mastery over our own selves? You know, the greatest spiritual teachers, the greatest spiritual warriors are those individuals who have taken the time to practice, to deeply introspect, to reflect. These are the people who understand that the mastery over their own inner being, their own feelings, their own self, their own mind is the most important mastery to have. You know, if you don't know yourself, you can never claim to know anybody or anything else. All knowledge first begins and ends with self-knowledge. So this is why we are practicing and practicing and practicing. And the practice and art of mindfulness allows you to reimagine scenarios out of the heat of that scenario so that you can master the skills it takes so that the next time you're plunged in that scenario, you have an awareness of a new way to be. So again, remember, share your insights with the tribe. Let them know how this practice is going for you. And if you're feeling vulnerable, share even more. We can all learn from each other's vulnerabilities, each other's challenges. I can't wait to see you back here tomorrow.